it's interesting hearing you. You're talking there about, almost the start of your career in the early 80s, not feeling you're quite ready, then coming over, and now you can sit and reflect on two world finals. And that first one, I mean, that one in 1990 at Bradford at Odsal, that's the first one I saw that as a fan, the first one I remember, because that was the first season I was going to Speedway. Can you remember much about that, your first world final? I mean, obviously, you for a first go at it. I mean, I think you finished ninth with 7 points.
Yeah, I actually finished better than that, to be perfectly honest with you. There was a weird thing that happened in my fourth race, I think, where I moved a bunch, but you could move then. And
Yeah,
I got 1 point in that race. It was against Hands. And they took away my point after the race. So I got third, but they took away my point because they said I moved too much of the tapes. So add a point to whatever I got, because that's legitimately what I got. And I think I tied for fifth or something.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I do remember how I feel. And it's funny, that bothers me now. At the time, it didn't bother me. I was so upset about how I did in my last two races, because I had 7 for my first 3. Well, I remember everyone saying, hey, enjoy the experience, enjoy it. And I was super excited to make a world final, because that was such a big deal to me to make a world final. And when I made it, and then a week or so out, I remember being nervous for a full week. Just I was not myself. But I remember having the attitude of thinking, I'm not going to enjoy this. I'm going to see if I can surprise everyone and try and win it. Like just see if maybe things come together that day.
Yeah.
I mean, I had beaten all those riders at one time at that point. Nobody there I had not beaten. So I thought, well, what if I do it all in one day? So I had a good first 3 rides. That was great. I remember, though, being on the parade and standing out there with the flags on the center green at Bradford, big crowd, and remembering how I was almost going to throw up. I was going to be sick. I didn't know how to get it together. And it felt horrible the way I felt out there. And, I don't ever remember feeling quite as bad as that, quite as ill as at an event. And it was a great meeting. I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed that I performed well. I think I did a performance that was just, that suggests I deserve to be in the race with these guys.
Yeah. Well, I think you beat the champion as well, didn't you? I think you beat Per Johnson in one of the races.
I did. Yeah. Just Sean Moran and I were the only ones to beat him that night.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that 10 years in Coventry, I mean, some really standout years. I mean, the 87 undefeated, I think, wasn't it? You went through the season undefeated. I don't know if you remember that run and how you maintained it, whether you talked about it.
I remember it. It was great. I think we had 5 riders with a 8-point average or better. Tommy and Kelvin came through in the clutch, so many Heat 15s. It'd be fun to look back at that season to see how many they, by having a great Heat 15, we won where we were in jeopardy of not, keeping our unbeaten performance. We had a great team. We also had a great team the next year. We won the league the next year also. We only had to swap out 1 or 2 riders from the first year to the next year, and we didn't go unbeaten, but we were number 1 again. Those were great times. Also, I think at the end of that last season, I think was the time when I first started in Sweden, and we won the league championship. Kelvin and I were on Mariestad, and we won the championship over there. That was great. It was around that time I went and rode for a team in Poland, and our team in Poland did really, really well. I rode there with Todd Wilshire was my teammate, and had a blast having Todd as a partner. And I had really good meetings over there in Poland also.
Yeah, and then I mean, so you had that kind of those seasons. One of the people we had on, actually, the first guest we had on was a guy who wrote a book called No Breaks, and this was about the lost season where there was no season in Britain. And it's a guy called Roddy McDougall who writes, and he asked what your feelings. I mean, this is a predictable answer maybe, but he said, "What are your feelings on seeing the state of Brandon Stadium now?" I don't know if you ever keep up with kind of some of the news over here over what's happening with tracks and developments.
Yeah, I've seen it's all run down. That makes me really sad. you know, excuse me 1 second, some alarm's going off. Okay, yeah, it's really sad. I don't know the state of it at this moment, but I have seen either pictures or videos of it all run down, and yeah, it's sad. You know, it's this speedway more or less defines me. It's my you know, I only did it for 12 years, but you know, one important 12 years of my life, it completely changed my life. I mean, leading to this day, the kind of person I am, really. So it's really sad. Unfortunately, you know, when you live in America, and you know, I was a good speedway rider, and like we talked about, and you know, I had, you know, some titles under my belt. But if I go golfing with some people that I don't know, and then they say, well, what, you know, what do you do now? Or I tell them, but I said, but the reason that they said, well, how did you get into that? And I said, well, from motorcycle racing, I was a speedway racer. And they go, oh, when you drag your knee on the ground, you know, people over here don't, you know, it's horrible being a top rider in a sport where you have to explain to people what your sport is. It's it's sad. It's sad sometimes.
Yeah, because they're thinking road racing, and it's not.
Oh no. It's very different. And so anyway, that really doesn't matter, I suppose. It's just, you know, sometimes my vanity, you know, I wish people knew what it was.
Yeah.
But it was great times.
And what you know, you reflected on those 2 world finals, and obviously now we've got the Grand Prix series. We've had that now for some time. Do you keep up with that? And what do you think of it as a way of, you know, deciding a world champion? Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I'm so happy. Just recently, they're starting to air those Grand Prix on TV here, so I can actually watch them on TV as opposed to trying to figure out where are they? Are they on YouTube, or where are they on Facebook? You know, whatever. And now they're on, and I'm so happy to get to follow them. I've been trying to follow them ever since I left, but it's not been easy over here. But now it's on the TV, and I hope everyone supports it over here so it stays on there. Yeah, the Grand Prix were fantastic. I mean, that makes sense. The one-day World Finals were fun, and they were great. And more times than not, the best rider won the World Championship. Not always, but more times than not. But now we truly get the World Champion. I think it's correct to have it had to evolve, and it's right. You know, but I still miss the nostalgia of the way it used to be, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Roddy also asked about, you know, you've reflected on, well, we all look at it really as British fans. I think we think about a golden age really for United States Speedway, for some of the riders you've already mentioned, and we can go on with a massive list. We haven't mentioned Samo Malenko, we haven't mentioned Ronnie Corey or Bobby Hart, there's so many people we can talk about. He asked whether you feel, and I get a feeling I know where this could be going, but he said, do you feel that the US may ever go back to the 80s level in terms of that clutch of top riders coming over and being so big in the sport?
I don't think so. I don't see how it possibly can happen. And speaking about the former riders, it's really great. I still have a great relationship with most of them. I just saw Bruce and Bobby recently, and Dennis Sigalos, and I try to see those guys as much as I can. Lance is moving all over the place, so we never seem to link up. But no, I don't think so. We have a couple of really good riders, but it's just a handful. But if you think about when I was racing over there, we had Sean and Kelly were still fantastic, and Dennis Siggy was fantastic, and Bobby was still at the height of his game, and Samer Malenko, and Ronnie was a heat leader at his track and made world finals. And yeah, there was so many. It was great. You know, we usually could fill a 7-man team and even have 1 or 2 reserves, you know, not always, but yeah, I sadly, I don't think that's ever coming back.
No, because I mean, in the Speedway of Nations, when you had Luke and Brock and that, they haven't got 7, they've got 2 or 3. And they're just nearly there.
Yeah, that's what you need now, isn't it? 3 on a team for those?
Yeah.
Okay, so they got a team, but yeah, but if you think about in the 80s, we would be we'd have a tough time figuring out who the 3 were. You know, it wouldn't be easy, as opposed to just, you know, that's the team.
Yeah. It's such a shame.
Yeah. Yeah, for
So-
the Americans, that was a golden age. I got the tail end of the golden
Yeah.
age, I'd say.
Yeah, and you then moved into you moved into doing all your stunt work, but you didn't go straight into stunt riding or doing your stunt work in the movies. How did you get into that?
Well, so without making too long a story, because I think some of these are long stories, when I did retire from racing speedway in England, I did not have a game plan. All I knew was that when the Ockle trees didn't budge and weren't able to find any more money from me, and I just said, I wasn't bluffing. So that was it. I went back to the States. I didn't have a backup plan. I started doing some production work on commercials where I just pick up the pizzas, pick up the trash, do whatever I could do. Just kept trying to learn. And every time I'd be on a job and I'd see some stunt on the job, I thought, well, I can do that. That looked easy enough to me. But the trick is, how do you get that job? And it's a tough old process. So I just kept slugging away and trying to meet people and networking and all that. And finally got a few breaks. I had some great people help me out and get me in some positions. And first movie I ever worked on was Con Air, and my good old friend Steve Holiday got me on that job. And then you start meeting the guys and meeting all the people that hire, and it's a tough old road to break in. It's really tough, and it's really tough if you don't have any family or people in the business, and I didn't. So I'm quite proud that I made my way in. I've worked on some of the top movies. I worked on most of the Chris Nolan movies, which were the 3 Batmans with Christian Bale, and Inception, and a couple Terminator movies, and 2 Transformer movies. One of my favorite movies I ever worked on was A Place Beyond the Pines, where I doubled Ryan Gosling.
Wow. That's brilliant.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that movie, it's a really fun movie to watch. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I worked with Ryan for months on that, and he was such an amazing guy. And I also got to work with Bradley Cooper, and he's still my friend to this day. So Ryan's my friend and Bradley's my friend, and I'm really lucky to have those guys as friends. And Christian Bale, I've ridden motorcycles with him. He's a friend, and he's a really, really great guy too. So I'm still doing it, but it's getting a little slower. It starts getting tougher doing that work as you get older.
Did you, the place beyond, because I mean, I read a list of on IMDb. I read what you've been on, and obviously there's some Screen Actors Guild Awards as well. But the place beyond the pines, did you do I remember one bit was on almost like the fairground. Was it like the Wall of Death kind of thing where you're going around?
Yeah.
Did you do that?
No, my friend Monty Perlin did that. So I helped co-coordinate that with my good friend Brian Smy, and we got Monty to do the Ball of Death, or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
But I did for a month teach Ryan how to ride better, because he actually did know how to ride a motorcycle, but I worked on his riding skills to try and improve them, and he improved a great deal in a month. He was a great student. And so when you watch the movie, you'll see Ryan riding, but when you see him ride a little bit faster, I was probably doing it. And
Right.
and then he has a crash, and I do the crash for him. And I did the Bradley was chasing me in the police car, and I worked with Bradley on his driving, and he was awesome too. He's such a generous man. I appreciate him so much. He just recently got me on a job last year on a movie. He recommended me to help stunt coordinate it, but the stunt coordinator is a good guy, and I ended up just being one of the stunt guys. And then next thing you know, I had an acting role. So sometimes when you're right in front of them, they just throw you in a spot. And so been very fortunate in my my adventures.
I mean, as a film fan, looking down that list, I was just stunned. Some of my favorite films are in there. Inception's one of the very best ones. So how was it on the Nolan ones then? I mean, we've gone away from Speedway, but this is really fascinating. Was it, did you get to know Nolan himself very much, or was it more you knew people who were doing the hiring and that side of things and production?
No, I worked around Chris Nolan many, many times, because when we started, the first movie I worked with Chris Nolan was my dear friend Tom Struthers was a co-coordinator at the time, and we had a great team of people. But it was Batman Begins, very small movie at the time. And the cast was very small. The stunt crew was very small. And we went to Chicago to do it. And we had so much fun making it. And Christian Bale was Batman. And people said to me, "Who's Batman?" I go, "It's somebody you've never heard of, probably. I've never heard of him, Christian Bale." And so we go there and we do it. And it was small crew, very intimate. But what would happen is, as Chris Nolan became so famous and got these big budgets, where maybe there was 50 or 70 people working on Batman Begins, now we're working on Inception, there might be 250 people working on. So we're still having lunch at the same time, and he might be at the next table, but yeah, he became one of the greatest directors in the world. So yeah, no, it changed a lot, but yeah, when you're on a crew like that and on a long period of time, you're working shoulder to shoulder with them. You're a big family away doing your thing.
And do they tend to, I mean, Tom Cruise is kind of famous for doing a lot of his own work, isn't he? Or it seems that he seems to like doing a lot of his own. Do you find that a lot of those leading actors want to do as much as they can, but obviously there's a point where that's not practical or they're not trained to that degree?
Some do, some want to do them, some don't. Some give their stuntman a lot of credit, some don't. It's everything under the sun. But at the end of the day, I think when you're watching a Tom Cruise movie that he's in, he was probably the producer. So if he goes and gets himself hurt and he has to pay the whole crew or shut down the whole production and it costs him X millions of dollars, that's probably out of his pocket, I assume. I don't know. But the bigger problem is if it's a big actor and they're not the producer might think, well, I don't want to get this actor injured because we've paid maybe several $1 million for this one particular set or so, and we're employing 100, 200 people.
Yeah.
And what it would cost us if the person breaks their ankle or something. So that's the reason why you always want, if you can, to have the actor do the action whatever you can, as long as it's safe, because it's easier to get the camera on him and see him, as opposed to somewhat hide a stunt person.
And a nice segue really from the start of this part about the stunt work is probably Ryan Gosling, because obviously he was in Place Beyond the Pines and then he was a stuntman in Drive. Did you watch Drive? Did you like that?
Yeah, it's fun. Drive, I think, was before Place Beyond the Pines. It's good. It's enjoyable. I didn't work with him on that one, unfortunately. I think that was before Place Beyond the Pines, but and unfortunately, I haven't worked with Ryan since Place Beyond the Pines. But I did have so much fun working on that movie. Probably one of the funnest movies I ever worked on. But hey, mind you, I had a lot of fun working on the other ones, the Terminators and the Batmans and stuff. All most of them have been fun, to be honest with you.
Is there anything coming out that we're going to see at some point that you're involved in?
I think everything's out right now. I still do that work, but I've been doing a lot of commercials. I'm with a team called LA Motorsports, so it's a terrific team of drivers, and I still do car commercials, and I wait for my phone to ring to hire me. So
Yeah, you did one for Honda motorcycles, didn't you?
Oh yes, that was a big job for me. So that was one of my real big breakthrough commercials.
Yeah,
I did it was a motorcycle called a Valkyrie. It's bigger than a Harley. It weighs, almost 1,000 pounds. And we went out to a dry lake bed, and their concept was they wanted the bike to be a street bike, not even close to being made for dirt. It had regular street tires on. I did these big broad slides across the dry lake, and the commercial was really well received. I knew I did a really great job on it. I remember thinking I just want to knock their socks off, and it all came together, and it's really cool. In the commercial world, when you do a commercial and you do a stunt on the commercial, you get paid every time it's on TV. At least you do in the States. And they ran that commercial for several years, and it made me a lot of money, and it really helped my career. So what would happen is I'd go be meeting all these stunt guys and stunt coordinators, and I say, "Hey, my name's Rick, and I'd love to work with you someday." And they'd say, "Oh yeah, nice to meet you," and sort of slough me off, and then maybe one time somebody would say, "Hey, by the way," they'd say to the stunt coordinator, this is the guy that did the Honda commercial." They go, "You did the Honda? Hey, come here and sit down, guys, gather around and hear the story," and
because it looks, it looks spectacular, the commercial, and it does.
Yeah, It's good. It's on YouTube. And they didn't even use I don't even think they used the biggest parts of the commercial. I did some really big broadsides. I think this commercial looks slightly tame. I'd love for you to see the director's cut someday, but
Yeah.
it was a really great experience for me that really propelled my career.
Listen, if it's out there on the internet, I'll find it. I tend to deep dive quite a lot, but it was kind of, for me, when I'd seen it, it was a bit like going, that's a road bike, but it's getting ridden more like a speedway bike. You think, yes, that'll do.
Yeah,
me.
that was all my.
I rode Hondas for years.
Oh, that was all my speedway years really paying off on that job. I had my feet up on the pegs, dragging the pegs, handlebars to the lock, and big broad slides.
Yeah. No, I love my Hondas. Love my Hondas.
Good.
I always loved it. The thing you don't see so much now, I think, with going back to the speedway is a lot of the teams now have the racing suits, so they all wear the same stuff, and even the GPs really. There's kind of, it's a bit more organised, I guess, in terms of how that looks. But when I think of you racing in Coventry, I think of the yellow leathers and kind of the. I often remember what sponsors people had, because when you see you in the Speedway Star, you'd always have the same kind of the main names. I think Sonic was always around your neck, if I remember right.
Yes, my dear friend David Bryan, we're still dear friends. He lives in Palm Springs, and his family are terrific. And I have a lifelong relationship with David and Brian and his family. And he was Sonic. He was Sonic UK. Yeah, it was a cool sponsor of mine for sure.
Was the yellow your choice, or how did that come about? There wasn't. Well, there were some people in yellow gear, but it wasn't the most common color, was it?
The one thing that really made me sad back when I was racing Speedway was I like every other rider, was always looking for sponsors, and it wasn't easy, and I don't think I ever got the kind of sponsorship money that for the what do you call them, the impacts or you make on TV, at the various TV or different things. You're racing in front of a crowd all the time, but we're also on TV from time to time.
Yeah,
we're on radio, we're doing all kinds of promotion, and you'd be lucky sometimes to get a few $1,000s from one and a few thousand from another or so. And I always felt like and same, I don't know how the Grand Prix guys do nowadays, but they're on TV worldwide, and it's tough to try and generate some income from that, or I found it, especially back then, it was.
No, it's still tough, because that's something that I try and do with some of the younger riders, is try and link them up with sponsorships.
Well, it's really tough at a local level, but I hope the Grand Prix boys are doing well, because they're on TV. The local riders, I think, probably not as much, right? And that's what you need. You need the national and international exposure, I suppose.
You do, and at the Grand Prix level, they have people to do that for them.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
Nice. Okay, good.
Yeah,
I didn't have people.
No, it's I've got quite friendly with Ty, and it's a bit difficult now because he can't come and do something like this, because he's got people that organise and coordinate how he's seen and all his interviews that he does.
Okay.
So he can't just say, "Oh yes, I'll come and do it for you," or whatever. There's certain things they can and can't do because of other sponsorship deals that they have, and they're linking them up with their media outlets.
Okay, well, I think he actually could come on with you guys. I don't think they're thinking anything that would be stopping him from doing this.
Well, he is going to do a different one with me, but he's only doing that because it's not recorded. It's just a live one, and it's a closed group, and his sponsors probably won't get to find out about it. So.
It's always been that weird thing, hasn't it, Lynn, where you want the sport to be on a much higher plane. You want more people coming, and we've heard tracks this season that have been struggling with crowds of 300 or less in some cases, which you do wonder how you can do that. But you also don't want it to get to the point where it's so big that almost the charm and the community aspect of it, which is a really big part of being a speedway fan and no doubt rider and other people in the sport, where you lose some of that and the personal touch. I mean, the riders are really accessible, aren't they? And it'd be nice to have bigger crowds to get it on a higher plane and back close to where it was, but you'd never really want it to be beyond recognition from probably what we know it as fans, I suppose.
Sadly, I don't think we'll have to worry about that, but I think I wish it could be as big as possible so that they were out of touch, to be perfectly honest with you, because we need, you know, that's the only way it's going to live on. It's when there's 300 people coming, how do they pay for that? I have no idea. How does the track generate enough money to, you know, bring it up, you know, to make it happen in the week after?
No, they don't. I mean, Poland is the only place at the moment that's doing it, but they have local government funding as well, you know, so we just need to try and take lessons from there and just kind of get heads out of our behinds, if you like, and say, look, they're doing it right, why don't we do it their way? Oh no, we do it our way. Okay, but we'll work on it. Would you, Rick, would you encourage your kids or grandkids to get into Speedway now?
I probably would not encourage them to get into Speedway, no. If my son's past the age of racing Speedway now, but he's actually not past the age, but he's going down a path right now. So my son's 27 now. And he did ride a Speedway bike a few times and he loved it. And Bruce taught him a little bit, and Pierce was a fantastic student, and he looked about as good as anyone I've ever seen in the very short time he rode. But yeah, so let's see. If I had grandchildren, would I persuade them to race? No. If somehow they saw it or they liked it and they tried it and, you know, thought it was great, I would support them. But I would not say, hey, look at this, we should do this. No. Definitely not.
We do get quite a wide range of reactions on that question. I ask it a lot.
But by the same token, you know, I think that goes with any sport. I think it's nice to introduce your kids to the various sports, and if they like one of them, that's great, and then you support them. If my grandchild someday likes golf, I'd say let's try and golf more, and if they love Speedway, I'd say let's go to the track. So, and I think I'd let it happen by free will. But no, I don't like the future of it. I would not like seeing my son race Speedway for a living. If he did it, I would probably enjoy it all happening, but I'm totally fine that it didn't happen.
I think we're probably at the time of the night, really, Lynn, where we want to ask some questions, if you don't mind. A bit more of a quick fire kind of approach, really. So we call it 5 ride maximum. So essentially we'll give you 3 points for each question. So the first, I don't know, number one really is, can you remember your first ever meeting, whether that's one that you raced in or the first one you've watched? I'm not sure how much you remember of that first time.
Well, which one are we looking for? First one I watched or first one I
whatever you prefer, whichever one stands out more for you.
Can I give 3 answers?
Please go for it. You're the boss.
Okay, very good. My first one I raced in was at Costa Mesa, and I was in 3rd division. I was in the front, and I was a very good starter in motocross. And I remember being worried because this track, I thought, if I make the start, first of all, I hope I can ride this track. It's so small and it's such a different shape than the one I practiced on. And I thought, I'm going to make the start on this. So, and I was hoping I didn't fall in front of everybody on the big crowd. And I made the start, and I was in the lead, and then somebody fell off, and then they red flagged the race, and then we did it again, and I made the start, and I was leading, and they red flagged again because somebody fell off. And then the third or fourth time, I make the start again. And in between one of the races, I shut the petcock off and I turned the fuel off. And so my bike stopped and I didn't know why. And I remember that being a horrible disappointment that I was going to win this race, my first race at Costa Mesa, and it didn't happen. There was that. I do remember going to, I think it was the first race I'd ever seen was in 1976. They had a track out at the LA Coliseum they made for this one-off event, and all the best American riders were in this race. I don't recall if Bruce was there, but there was a lot of top level riders there. And I remember watching some practice and thinking, when they come to the first turn, when they go sideways, won't the rear tire hit the front tire, and the front tire, won't they all hit tires?
Yeah.
And as you know, when you watch, that doesn't happen very often. But I thought this, and then the very first race of the night, all four hit each other, and they all flew in the stands. And I just remember thinking, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And what I thought just happened. And then funny thing is, I've almost never seen that sort of thing again. It's only been a few times. And when it does happen like that, it's usually pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, great. Really good insights. That's 3 points. That's your first ride done. 3 points in the bag.
It feels like one of those things you can't do bad.
No, you can't really fail that unless you just refuse to answer. And then the worst you get is 2 in a bonus rather than 3. So Lynn,
Yeah,
second
no,
ride.
no, we've only had one that just didn't have an answer for one at all. Right. Do you have a favorite track that you've ridden?
Oh yeah, I do. And my favorite track was the Long Beach track in California. So we only raced this track once a year, and it was only the second half of my career we had that track. It's a proper track around a football pitch. So it's a big track like England, and that's where we had our qualifier each year to go into the overseas final. And the track had long straights. We had the World Team Cup there one year also, and long straights, nice dirt. Brad Oxley prepped the track, I believe, and it was fantastic, and I loved it so much. And the last time I raced it, I won every race to go into the overseas final. And I beat a good field. You know, I think Sam got second, Ermolenko, and Billy Hamill or Greg Hancock got third or fourth. It was a top field, and you know, a really great memory to win that race.
Excellent.
All right, 6
3
points.
points. 3. Do I have 6 now?
You on 6. These are the easiest 3 points you can win. I think you're handling it very easily. You're popping out at the start. You've got no problems. The third one, I mean, again, none of this is to catch you out. We're just interested to know more. So the third one is about your favorite rider. Now this would be interesting to know more about your favorite rider, both when you were young and getting into the sport. And you've already mentioned Ollie Olsen as a potential influence, and Bruce as well. But also, I wonder if there's someone at the moment who's racing that you really like watching, and is someone that stands out and you look out for.
Yeah, my first favorite rider was Bruce. I used to see the pictures, and you know, and it was a whole American team, to be honest with you. There's these photos, and I have some of them where they're all sitting on the bike, or 2 or 3 are sitting on the bike, and they're all around them. And it's Bruce and Bobby and the Moran brothers and Gresham and maybe Autry and some of them. And I could look at a picture like that, and I could look at it, and I could put it on the wall, and I could just think, oh, only that could be me. I just remember feeling that. And so really at that time, Bruce, he was the guy. And you know, it's funny when you look back at Bruce's career, it's so short, really. You got to look at like somebody like Greg Hancock for if you want that longevity of a career that's like almost unsurpassed, really. So Bruce was my guy. Then I got to ride with Ole. I actually watched. I probably got that first one wrong when you say the first race I watched. That was the first one I watched in person at the Coliseum. But the first one I watched, we used to have this thing called Wide World of Sports. There weren't many channels on TV over here, 3 or 4 channels, and Wide World of Sports was a big deal. And I remember watching the Wembley World Finals with Ole and Ivan and all the top riders of the time, and the cool masks they had, and I loved that. That was so fantastic. And then flash forward, and all of a sudden my very first race at Coventry, it's Ole and I'm number 2 against Kenny Carter and Doug Wire.
Wow.
And, this is the year after the Coliseum clash with Bruce Penhall, and, Carter and the Americans, the arch enemies, and now I'm racing against him in the first race. And by the way, going back to the first question, my very first race at Coventry, it was cold. I didn't score a point, I believe, unless I got won by somebody breaking down. I don't recall it. And not only did I not get a point, or if I got one, I wasn't near him at the finish line either at the end of the 4 laps. I was maybe halfway between turn 3 and 4. So it wasn't even close, By the way, one little tidbit, after that first night, I thought, okay, well, I got to go practice on this track after the event. And I came off the back out of turn 4 on one of my practice laps, and I'm sliding across on my chest at 60, 70 miles an hour. And that was my introduction to Speedway at Coventry, really.
Wow. God, that's what do you miss about it? I didn't ask you this, but as fans, we talk a lot about the smells and the sounds and all of that. Do you when you think back to your racing days, do you think of that kind of stuff as well, the atmosphere around you?
I really missed that feeling of after you had a really great result, feeling king of the world, and walking into to have a pint with some of the spectators or your friends after the races. I really miss that, hey, attaboy, and then the travel with Kelvin to Sweden. And I really miss all the, being able to say I was, when I'd be on a flight somewhere and they said, what do you do for a job? I said, oh, I'm a professional speedway rider. I was so proud of that.
Yeah.
I was so proud to make money doing something I loved. I didn't enjoy being nervous for big events. I did not enjoy that. But I really loved everything that went with being a top speedway racer and being able to say that's how I made my living. I miss that so much.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. 9 points. Well, there you go. So we're coming up to the 4th program ride here, Lynn.
Good. I want a maximum.
Yeah.
This is where things might get sticky.
Uh-oh.
Was there a track that you rode that you thought, I don't want to come back here ever again?
There's a couple. I never could figure out how to ride Cradley, and I'm quite ashamed of that because it was quite a good American track. Most Americans rode that track well, and I did not. And the fans there were tough. I can't say I loved it. It's different now. Some of those same fans that were fans of Cradley, and not Coventry, they're my friends.
Yeah.
And that's all good. And Exeter is another one. I only raced there twice. I had a really bad crash at Exeter. You're right. This is a little tougher, but those stand out right there. What I just said. Of all the tracks in England, I think I had the hardest time at Cradley.
Yeah. I mean, Greg got that one dialed in.
You know what? All the Americans did. Bruce had it dialed in. Bobby had it dialed in. Greg did. Billy did. Billy Hamill. Really, like, who didn't? It was me.
Yeah. Yeah, but every rider's got a bogey track. It's just.
Yeah.
Thing. But there you go.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. What track did come at the end of my time there was Arena Essex. And I remember riders had a tough time riding there, but I had no problem riding that track. I think I dropped 1 point in 3 meetings there or something like that, or 2 points. And I thought, wow, that'd be a great home track for me. Although I think that it was really tough for those guys to go to other tracks because it was so different than the other ones.
Yeah.
Was that about throttle control and the kind of the size of the track and the dimensions?
It was about the really narrow the really long straightaways, and the way you really felt like you had to come in almost backwards into the corners. And I think it just suited an American rider. We're used to riding like that, as opposed to the big Polish and German tracks. They're so big and wide open, and the race in the Golden Helmet of Czechoslovakia is such a big round track.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
well done. We're almost
Okay,
there.
Four
Okay.
rides, and of course you're getting picked for Heat 15. There'd be a riot if you weren't.
That's
So here we go. So Heat 15. I don't know how you feel about this one. So I just wonder who you think the next rider to win their first World Championship might be. I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, you might be stumping me here. So the one that hasn't won yet.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to get a maximum now.
Oh no.
I'm trying to think of the current riders that I'm watching the Grand Prix that hasn't won one that looks very impressive.
Oh,
Because
just the World Championship, not a Grand Prix. So the whole World Championship.
that's what I mean. The whole season that we're talking about winning the Grand Prix. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Winning the whole deal, the World
Yeah.
Championship. That's
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. Like in the Grand Prix setup, how many of the guys are world champions right now, or previous world champions? Aren't there about 5 out of the 16 that are?
Yeah, but
I mean,
you've got the likes of Dan Bewley, Magic Janowski. You might think he's missed his chance. Dan Bewley's coming up, but it's just his first season. And I think that of the guys that have previously won it, I think they've got a couple of other world championships still in them.
you know, the one I'm sad that hasn't won it is Emil Sayfutnov.
Yeah.
Oh no,
I'm very sad that he hasn't won it, and he maybe will never get a chance now based on what's going on. And I don't think what's going on is any fault of his.
No.
So that makes me sad.
I mean, the year that Ty won his first world championship, he won it because Sayfutnov got injured. It took him
maybe
3 rounds
maybe that
to
was his
catch up
chance.
with his points. It took him 3 rounds to catch up.
He even when I saw him the last year or so when he got his, I think, second or third, he didn't look quite as strong as he was before that. But that happens a lot of times in some of these guys, like, and that's what makes it more impressive what Greg did, the way he had a long gap between world titles. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg taught me that I quit way too early. I think I matured very late in Speedway. It took me till my last 4 years till I really developed and had confidence to go out there. And you know, Greg's taught so many people a lot by going till he's 50 and it's truly incredible what he did. You got a couple good English riders, and I can't think of the other rider, not Bewley, but the other one.
Bewley, Robert Lambert.
Lambert looks very impressive lately.
Yeah. He's getting good. And there's also Patrick Dudek, who's nibbling away at the heels.
Yeah, he had a bad season or two or so, and he's looking better. But no, I seem to be, when I'm watching, I seem to be rooting for Lambert for sure lately. He looks really good.
Yes, he's quite ruthless. He's a bit kind of Andy Smith like.
Interesting. Yeah, it'd be fun if I saw some of these guys more, you know, day in, day out. You know, you know, it might change my opinion of how I feel. But I get to see so little of what's going on. So you know, and I understand that might change the way I reflect on how I think.
Yeah.
It's been a big void since Greg stopped, and we don't have any American representation in this. I still love it, but it would sure be nice to watch a contender that's American.
It is. I mean, I'm off to Cardiff at the weekend, and the last time I went to Cardiff was when Greg won the round at Cardiff.
Yeah.
And we nearly blew the roof off because in the UK, what we felt like was if we couldn't get a British winner, we'd have Greg. We'd just adopt him instead. Oh
yeah, well, that's easy. I mean, who doesn't love Greg? I mean, there's a few voids in some of these sports. I missed watching Valentino Rossi in road racing. I missed Greg in Speedway. That's what happens when we watch these sports for so long. You start having these voids, you know, and you got to start trying to adopt some new people.
That's it.
You know, I am like half English. I consider it's quite part of my identity. You know, my daughter was born in England. My wife's English. So, you know, for me, it's usually US and England. That's who I'm rooting for.
Yeah.
Well, just for that, I think you've got the 3 points at the end anyway. I think you sneaked across the line. It's almost a photo finish, but you got it.
That's nice of you, but you know what, if I got a max my first night, hey, by the way, you know, my very first race ever in Europe was actually not that one I said in England, but that was my first one in England, but my first one was in the Netherlands. I raced at Rotterdam on the concrete. I'd never raced on concrete.
Yeah.
And Bruce's mechanic helped me out that night, Mikey Tazanagas, and he was such a great guy. And I stayed with Mikey at Bruce's old house, and that became my house. And the very first night of racing in Rotterdam against all the Europeans, I won every race. And then it took me, I think, a year or two before I ever did that again.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I've been looking at, you know, the start lines, and I think we could go back to having concrete start lines to stop all the gardening.
Oh, is there talk about that?
There is in some quarters, but the riders aren't in favour of it.
Interesting thought, though. That'd be fun to explore that idea.
Yeah, it gives a more even start.
That'd be fun to explore that idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's always worth looking at new ideas. After all, you know, most sports do evolve, and you know, Formula One, we've seen a lot of changes, some good, some bad, and that's, I guess, quite normal.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like the tapes touching one, Lynn. I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, Rick, about, you know, the world final and all the whole fuss about that. And there was a time when you could move, you just didn't touch the tapes. Whereas now, if you move and you're kind of out, which I don't know. I've always wondered. Sometimes you scupper yourself, don't you? If you move a bit early and then you miss your start, that's your own fault.
Yeah, and you see it sometimes in races. They'll let a race go on when the rider's sort of self-penalized, you know. But hey, Michael, you'd score me some big points. You get me, I'd give you a maximum if you got me that point back from Bradford. I don't know why it matters to me, but I'd like that point back. And I'd love to know why a point was taken away after a race. I've never heard of that ever.
No.
I think we need to put a petition together, Lynn, and we need to get this uncovered and open the case again, don't we?
Well, they are actually considering reopening the track.
Bradford?
Yep.
Oh, that's great. That was a great track. That's one of the great ones.
Yeah, because I lived in Leeds for about 30 years before I came back to Scotland. And I used to go off to Bradford. Now, my husband knew nothing about Speedway. The only thing he knew was it was somewhere his wife went off to at the weekend while he was working. And I used to go to Bradford, and then it closed down. But there's somebody's bought it over, and just as the pandemic came in, they'd got permission to reopen it as a speedway track. And within the process of getting the track laid, and then COVID came. So I'm actually going back down to Leeds next week. So I think I'll pop round and see if they've restarted it yet.
Okay, great.
You know, so I'd love to see Oddsall coming back.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, that seems a really happy and hopeful and positive note for us to end on. I think then that's a really good one. So I think from my point, Rick, I mean, you've just been really generous with your time. It's been really interesting talking and listening to you, both about the Speedway, but also what you've done subsequently. And just really want to wish you the very best with whatever you do coming up. It's been really good fun.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate hi to all my old friends that happen to be watching this, and I hope to see you again someday. I'm overdue for coming over to England to some of the races and seeing some of my old friends. So hope I do see you soon.
Okay.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.